Hey everybody! This video is walking you guys through your third and last essay of the course. We are switching gears entirely for this essay, so you are not writing about the same topic and stance as your first and second essay. This essay is actually going to be a literary analysis essay over a piece of literature, over the short story that we're reading in this course, In a Grove. So just to reiterate very, very clearly, do not write this third essay about the same topic and stance you've been talking about in your first and second essay. This is a totally different shift. It is a literary analysis essay over the short story In a Grove. So for the purposes of this essay, you're going to create an argument about In a Grove focused on either a character, a theme, or an approach. So whether you choose to talk about a character, a theme, or an approach is up to you. Choose what you find to be most interesting. So when you're looking at a character, you're looking at different things like behaviors and motivations. You're trying to think about things like who is the main character, or what's the main characteristics of that character, and what are the descriptions that help you understand those characteristics? How do you know these things? Do any of these characteristics conflict, perhaps? In this story especially, there's an unreliable narrator on every one of the stories, so we don't know who is telling the truth. So how can you assess each character? What is it that you're told about them that makes you believe X, Y, or Z? So are they trustworthy? Why might they be telling the truth or not? Why might they be lying? What do they have to what do they stand to gain or lose? And then what is the background of those characters, including those smaller characters as well? If you choose instead to look at a theme, you're looking at the overall message or point of the story. So what is it that the author wants you as the reader to get from the story? What do they want you to understand? What's the universal idea? And then what evidence do you have to suggest that that is the valid theme? And then if you choose to do an approach, those are the different approaches that we read about, whether it's new criticism or the historical approach or whatever it might be. That's a school of thought or a way that you read the story. So you could choose one of those different critical lenses and look at the story through that lens. So there are different ways you could approach this analysis. It's up to you which one you do. Whichever it is, make sure that you are comfortable with the language of that. So whether it's the character, the theme, or the approach. This should have all of the usual parts of an argument. It should have an introduction with a thesis claim, should have main ideas with evidence, a conclusion. It should also have those counter arguments and the refutations as well. So your essay is going to be 3 to 4 pages in length and is due on Sunday, May 1st by 11:59 p.m. Mla formatting is required. Everything's checked for plagiarism, and make sure that you have the minimum page length as well. You're actually going to submit this just a final draft with the bibliography, nothing else required in this submission. So I've given you some ideas here when it comes to the character analysis. And I'm sorry, I should point out for the bibliography, you're not required to have any research. If you want to do a little bit of research and include that, you're more than welcome to. But the bibliography should have at least the short story listed on it. So some ideas or some examples just to kind of get your ideas flowing. If you choose to do a character, so you could do a character analysis, your job is to paint the portrait of what that character is. So look again at motivation or behavior patterns that tell you about that character. So you're going to need to pull in evidence from the story in the form of quotes which show those characteristics. So for example, if I was going to argue that, I don't know, that the police chief was actually the main character. He's the protagonist. He's trying to solve the case. That would be a pretty original argument. It may not be, something everybody agrees with, but I would want to pull in quotes from the story that show the police chief doing that. Or if I, for example, wanted to look at, one of the two lovers, I might look at what the mother or the mother-in-law says about that character. I might look at what other characters say about that character to argue that they are, in fact, the protagonist or the antagonist, or that they are an unreliable narrator, or that they are actually the killer. These are all different ways that you could talk about different characters. Just make sure that you're using the language of literary analysis when it comes to understanding character and characterization. So things like round, dynamic, flat, static, main, primary, secondary, antagonist, protagonist. And then make sure that you're pulling in quotes that show that character being X, Y, or Z. If you choose to do a theme, you could talk about a lot of different themes in this story. I've given you just some ideas here. You could talk about the idea of truth. What is truth? Truth is actually just relative. Truth may not be an absolute state in this story. And then I would want to pull in quotes that show that truth is not an absolute state. Or if I want to talk about the idea of truth versus perception and how perception shapes truth, that might be a theme. I could talk about things like honor and virtue and the importance of those elements in certain characters or in certain societies. I could talk about the idea of love. What is love in this case? Is love dying for someone else? Is love, I don't know, shielding yourself from shame? There's a lot of ways you could talk about it. The ideas of tradition or rebellion in this society could be very important to this narrative. Again, whichever I choose, I want it to be, these are just ideas, so you do not have to do anything on this list, but I want to choose specific quotes from the story which show this concept of that truth is relative, or show the concept that tradition is more important than anything. So I'll pull those quotes in from the story as pieces of evidence to help prove my idea. The last way you could do this, of course, is an approach. So you could do a feminist, say, for example, a feminist reading of a certain character in the story and her role. You could do a cultural reading and how it relates to that story or the theme. So why is the Japanese samurai culture so important here? Or why is, certain ideas of the Japanese culture really vital to the story? I could do a psychological reading of a character. So I've had people argue that certain characters have certain psychological conditions that are rooted in psychology. And they've pulled in quotes from the story that show that that reading of that character or whatever it might be. You could do a new critical reading. You could talk about symbolism. So why is the symbol of, say, I don't know, a kimono or a sword or something very, very, very important in the story? And then make sure that you're, again, pulling in those quotes that show that. So as you make your choice, think about what you want to say about this piece of literature. You're not limited to these examples, and I do highly encourage you to find your own examples, your own ideas to focus on. You don't have to have this approved, but you are more than welcome to send me an email if you want to run an idea by me. Again, you're required to have all the parts of an argument, so that's a concrete thesis claim in your introduction, main ideas with solid evidence. Again, this is evidence meaning quotes from the story that show or prove this certain idea, and then 1 to 3 opposing views with refutations as well. So the essay is all you're going to submit for this. Make sure that it is a clean, well-organized document, a Word doc, and that you have a bibliography which has at least your short story listed on there. If you choose to use any other sources, I would again limit it to maybe 1 to 2, maybe 2 or 3, but you make sure you cite those in text and include them on a bibliography as well. So again, purposely broad because I want you guys to choose what is of interest to you, but please let me know if you have any questions about this at all. And hopefully you have fun kind of applying these ideas to a piece of literature and analyzing either a character, a theme, or an approach.